After spending $62,000 over 5 years to help my parents stay afloat, they ended up giving everything to my unemployed brother. So I let them lose the house. My name is Jake, and any lingering doubts I had about my role in this family disappeared the day I discovered their will. And no, it wasn't during some serious family meeting where they sat me down to break the news. I found out by accident. Pure dumb luck. A few months ago, I was at their house, the same house I'd been financially supporting for 5 years. I'd been covering the mortgage, picking up groceries, handling small repairs, basically keeping things running while my brother, Eric, contributed absolutely nothing. And I don't mean he helped here and there, I mean he literally did nothing. No job, no goals, no responsibilities. Just hanging around, waiting for life to hand him everything, which, apparently, my parents were more than happy to do. That day, I was helping my dad with some paperwork. As usual, he had no clue how to handle any of it himself. He asked me to scan a stack of legal and financial documents, and I was going through them when I saw it. A folder titled, Estate Plan and Last Will and Testament. It was sitting there mixed in with everything else. I'm not the type to snoop, but my curiosity got the better of me. After all, I'd been the one making sure they didn't end up homeless. It didn't seem unreasonable to wonder how things would be handled down the line. So, I opened the folder, and what I read made my stomach drop. Everything, and I mean everything, was going to Eric. The house, the savings, the property. I wasn't mentioned, other than a generic line about loving both sons equally. That's right, equally. Despite the fact that they were handing over everything to the son who had never lifted a finger while I was the one keeping their lives together. I felt like a fool. I'd been putting in time, money, and effort so they wouldn't have to worry, while they were planning a future that left me out entirely. Eric wasn't just lazy, he was entitled. He never gave them a cent, never helped, never cared. But somehow, he'd convinced them he deserved it all. Maybe because he's the youngest. Maybe because they've always babied him. Maybe because he knew how to manipulate them. Whatever the reason, their minds were made up. I sat there stunned, staring at the page. Angry, hurt, betrayed. Was this always the plan? Was I just their free ride, with no thanks or recognition? Had they ever actually appreciated me? I must have been sitting there for a while because my dad eventually came back into the room and asked, "Hey Jake, what's taking so long?" I didn't hide the will. I held it up and looked at him. "So this is it, huh?" I said, keeping my voice level. "Everything to Eric. After all I've done?" His face went pale. Then he sighed, like I was just a child throwing a tantrum. "Jake, it's not what you think." "Really?" I said. "Because it looks pretty straightforward to me. I've been covering your mortgage, doing your shopping, maintaining your house, while Eric hasn't done a thing. And you still think he's the one who cares?" He looked embarrassed, but he didn't try to explain. All he said was, "It's complicated." That was it. No apology, no justification, just those two useless words. Like he expected me to forget about it and go back to being their personal ATM. I should have walked out right then, but I wanted to hear it from both of them. So I called out for my mom. When she came in and saw the will in my hands, she looked guilty, but what she said only made it worse. "Jake, honey, you don't need the inheritance," she said softly, like she was doing me a favor. "You have a great job and you're independent. Eric struggles. We just want to make sure he's okay." That was it. That's when something broke inside me. They weren't confused or misguided. They knew exactly what they were doing. And they thought it was right. After years of enabling Eric, they were now planning to reward him with everything, while I got pushed aside. I took a deep breath, clenched my jaw, and set the will on the table. "Got it," I said, calmly. "Good to know where we stand." Then I walked out of the house without looking back. I ignored their calls and slammed the door. They made their choice. Now it was time for me to make mine. I didn't return. I didn't call. I didn't check in. For the first time in years, I let them handle their own problems. If something broke, they could fix it. If they needed groceries, they could go themselves. Most importantly, I stopped paying the mortgage. The silence lasted almost 2 weeks. I think at first they assumed I was just sulking and would eventually come back. Maybe they thought I'd apologize. But as the days passed with no word from me, and more importantly, no money, I could feel the shift in their attitude. Then one afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Dad. The property taxes are due. That was it. No, hello. No, hope you're doing okay. No, sorry about before. Just a blunt message, like I was still their bank account. I stared at it, almost laughing at how predictable it was. They really thought they could treat me like nothing and still expect support. So I replied, I'm sure Eric will handle it, since the house is his. 5 minutes later, Mom called. I let it ring. Then she texted, Jake, please don't be like this. We need to talk. Now they wanted to talk. Now that the bills were piling up. I waited an hour, then replied, there's nothing to discuss. You made your choice. Now live with it. I figured that was the end. I had said my piece. I didn't feel guilty, but then Eric chimed in. His text came in late that night, and I knew it was going to be smug. Dude, why are you being dramatic? It's not a big deal. Just help them like always. I almost laughed. Not a big deal? He really thought I had no reason to be upset. I replied, nope. I think you've got it handled, since you're the favorite. He came back with, oh my god, are you seriously mad about the will? Grow up. It's just money. Oh, now it was, just money. Easy to say when it's all going to him. I replied, great, so you won't mind using that money to pay the mortgage then? Silence. A few minutes later, Mom texted again, laying on the guilt. Jake, we're your parents. Families help each other. We did so much for you growing up, and now you're abandoning us. I had to take a deep breath to avoid tossing my phone across the room. Abandoning them? I'd spent years making sure they were taken care of. While they spoiled Eric, I carried the weight. And now that the consequences were finally showing up, I was the bad guy? Not a chance. I replied, you made it clear I wasn't part of the family when you left me out of the will. Eric can take care of you now. I could almost hear her gasp. She was always good at playing the victim, even when clearly in the wrong. Then my dad sent another message, and this one really pushed me over the edge. We're not asking for much. Just enough to cover the mortgage for a few more months. Don't be selfish. Selfish? That word made my blood boil. I had given them my time, my energy, and a huge chunk of my savings for years, expecting nothing in return. And how did they repay me? By making sure I received absolutely nothing. And now that I had finally stood up for myself, I was the one being called selfish. I tightened my jaw, took a deep breath, and replied, no. I'm finished. Then I hung up the phone. They had made their choice. Now they had to live with it. The silence lasted one day. I knew my parents wouldn't give up that easily. But I wasn't prepared for what happened next. The following morning, I got a notification on my phone, a bank transfer request. I frowned and unlocked it. It was from my mother. She'd actually requested money, like I was her personal ATM. Amount: $3,500. I stared at it, half laughing at the audacity. No message, no explanation, just a cold, bold request for the exact amount they needed to cover their mortgage. They didn't even bother asking anymore. They just assumed I would cave. I declined it immediately. Not even 5 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Mom. I let it ring. Then came a text. Jake, I know you saw the request. Why did you decline it? I took my time responding, because it's not my responsibility. Try Eric. Another call. I ignored it. Then another text. We're going to lose the house if you don't help us. So, this was an emergency now? After years of treating me like a walking wallet, they were finally facing consequences. I replied, maybe you should have thought about that before deciding I didn't matter. Seconds later, Dad joined in. Are you really going to let your parents become homeless? I laughed out loud. The manipulation was so obvious, it was almost funny. They weren't broke. They weren't going to end up on the street. They just didn't want to touch their savings, because they were used to me paying for everything. I ignored them for the rest of the day. That night, a text from Eric popped up. Dude, just send the money already. You're making it a bigger deal than it is. I clenched my jaw. This entitled little punk thought he had the right to lecture me? I replied. You mean the same money you're inheriting? Why aren't you sending it? His response came quick. You know I don't have that kind of cash right now. Oh, now it was about cost? He was totally fine with me draining my accounts, but the second it was his turn, suddenly he had nothing. I said, then figure it out, bro. They chose you. No response. I went to bed feeling free. Like I had finally broken out of years of guilt and manipulation. But it got worse. The next day at work, I got a call from the front desk at my apartment. Hey Jake. Your parents are here. I almost dropped my phone. They say it's an emergency and you won't answer their calls. They showed up at my place. Because I wouldn't pay their bills? I rubbed my forehead. Please don't let them up. I wasn't expecting them. A pause. They're being kind of pushy. I don't care. They can leave. I hung up. Immediately, another text from Mom. We're downstairs. Open the door. No question. No explanation. Just another demand. I didn't reply. Then, Jake, we're not leaving until you talk to us. I took a deep breath and stood up. If they wanted a confrontation, they were about to get one. I stormed downstairs, keys in hand, blood boiling. There they were, Mom, Dad, and Eric, standing together like they were staging some kind of family intervention. Mom had her arms crossed, giving me that classic disappointed mother glare. Dad looked annoyed and uncomfortable, hands in his pockets, as if he couldn't believe he had to deal with this in person. And Eric, the leech, looked bored, like this was barely worth his time. Mom stepped forward, all dramatic. Jake, finally. We need to talk. I leaned on the doorframe, arms crossed. No, you need to leave. She blinked, shocked. Excuse me? You heard me, I said calmly. You can't just show up at my place and demand money. That's insane. Dad scoffed. You're really going to let us lose the house over a petty disagreement? I let out a cold laugh. A petty grudge? You mean how I was good enough to pay your bills but not good enough for your will? That's not a grudge. That's betrayal. Mom gasped, clutching her chest like I'd slapped her. Jake, that's not fair. We did what we thought was best for the family. I tilted my head. You mean best for Eric? Just admit it. Silence. Eric finally mumbled, look, man, I don't want to get in the middle. I didn't ask for anything. I turned to him. No, you just sit back and take whatever's handed to you. You're 28, Eric. Get a damn job. His face turned red. What the hell, dude? I stepped closer. You want to inherit the house? Start acting like a homeowner. Pay some bills. I'm done being your banker. Eric looked away, speechless. Mom sighed, reaching for guilt again. Jake, he's your brother. I nodded. And I've supported him more than you have. Dad's voice grew tense. You're being selfish. I laughed. Coming from you? That's rich. I gestured between them. You chose Eric over me, and now that there's a price, you want me to fix it. Not happening. Mom snapped. We thought you'd be mature about this. I raised an eyebrow. Mature? You mean I should just accept the betrayal and keep paying your bills? That's what you really mean. Dad stepped closer, towering over me like when I was a kid. We raised you, Jake. We fed you. We gave you everything. The least you could do is help us now. I stared him down. I have helped. For years. And you repaid me by cutting me out. Mom's lips trembled. We thought you'd understand. I exhaled. Oh, I understand. I was never your son. I was your paycheck. Silence. Thick, cold silence. I turned to Eric. And you? What's your excuse? You've had years to grow up, contribute, and help them. But you didn't. You let them carry you, and now you expect me to do the same. Eric snapped. What do you want me to say? I didn't ask for this. I nodded. Right. You didn't ask. You just benefited. He had nothing to say. Just silence. Mom tried one more time. Jake, we're family. Family takes care of each other. I stared at her for a long moment. Exactly. So why didn't you take care of me? She froze. No words. No excuse. I let out a slow breath, feeling lighter than I had in years. We're done here. I turned around and walked back inside, slamming the door behind me. My phone buzzed with a final text from Dad. Wow. After everything we've done for you, You're really going to leave us like this? I smiled and typed back. No. You left me. I'm just finally accepting it. I hit send, then blocked all their numbers. But I had no idea that blocking them would only make things worse. Because less than 24 hours later, it exploded on Facebook. They weren't tech savvy, but they sure knew how to broadcast their version of the story when it made them look like victims. At first, I thought it was typical drama. But as I scrolled, I realized it wasn't just about the money anymore. But now that I finally stood up for myself, I'm the one being called selfish. I tightened my jaw, took a deep breath, and said, no. I'm finished. Then I hung up. They made their choice. Now they would have to live with it. The silence lasted just one day. I knew my parents wouldn't give up that easily, but I wasn't prepared for what came next. The next morning, I got a bank transfer request notification on my phone. I sighed and opened it. It was from my mother. She had actually sent me a request for $3,500. No message, no explanation, just a cold demand for the exact amount needed to cover their overdue mortgage. It was like they thought I was their personal ATM. I declined immediately. Not even 5 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Mom. I let it ring. Then came a text. Jake, I saw you declined the request. Why? I waited a moment before replying. Because it's not my responsibility. Try Eric. Another call. Declined. Another text. We're going to lose the house if you don't help. So now it was an emergency? After years of using me like a walking wallet, they were finally facing consequences. I replied, maybe you should have thought of that before deciding I didn't matter. Seconds later, my dad joined in. Are you really going to let your parents be homeless? That one actually made me laugh. They weren't broke. They just didn't want to dip into their own savings. They were used to me footing the bill. That night, I got a text from Eric. Dude, just send the money. You're being dramatic. I clenched my jaw. This entitled little punk thought he could guilt trip me? I answered. You mean the money you are inheriting? Why aren't you sending it? He replied. You know I don't have that kind of cash right now. Oh, so now cost was the issue? He was fine with me draining my savings, but when it came to him, suddenly it was impossible. I said, you'd better figure it out then, bro. You're the one they chose. No response. I went to bed that night feeling calm. Like I'd finally broken free. But the next day, it got worse. I was at work when the front desk of my building called. Hey Jake, your parents are here. I nearly dropped the phone. They showed up at my apartment. The receptionist added. They say it's an emergency, and you won't answer your phone. I took a deep breath and said, please don't let them up. I'm not expecting visitors. She hesitated. They're being kind of pushy. I don't care. They can leave. I hung up, and boom, immediate text from Mom. We're downstairs. Open the door. No question. No apology. Just another demand. Then another. Jake, we're not leaving until you talk to us. Fine. They wanted a confrontation? They were going to get one. I grabbed my keys, stormed downstairs, and flung open the door. There they were. Mom, Dad, and Eric. Standing like they were staging some kind of intervention. Mom crossed her arms, ready with her trademark guilt trip face. Dad stood stiff, his look full of judgment. And Eric? He looked bored, like this was just mildly annoying. Mom jumped in first. Jake, finally. We need to talk. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. No, you need to leave. She blinked in disbelief. Excuse me? You can't just show up and demand money. That's insane. Dad scoffed. You're really going to let us lose the house over a petty grudge? I laughed coldly. A petty grudge? You mean when you decided I was only good enough to pay your bills, but not worthy of being in your will? That's not a grudge. That's betrayal. Mom gasped, clutching her chest. Jake, that's not fair. We just did what was best for the family. No, you did what was best for Eric. Just say it. Silence. Finally, Eric muttered. Look man, I didn't ask for any of this. I snapped. No, you just sat back and took everything handed to you. You're 28, Eric. Get a job. You want to inherit the house? Start acting like a homeowner. His face turned red. What the hell, dude? I stepped forward. You heard me. Mom tried again. He's your brother. Yep. And I've been there for him longer than you have. Dad's voice got louder. You're being selfish. I laughed. That's rich, coming from you. You decided Eric deserved everything and I deserved nothing. Now you want me to fix it? Not happening. Mom's voice went sharp. We thought you'd be mature about this. Oh, you mean roll over and keep paying your bills like nothing happened? That's not maturity. That's stupidity. Dad tried to loom over me. We raised you, fed you, clothed you. The least you could do is help us. I stared him dead in the eye. And I have, for years. You repaid me by cutting me out. Mom's lip trembled. We thought you'd understand. I do. I understand that I was never family to you. I was your paycheck. Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Then I looked at Eric, and you. You've had years to grow up, contribute, do something. But you didn't, because you knew they'd cover for you. And now you expect me to pick up where they left off. Eric threw his hands up. What do you want me to say? I didn't ask for this. No, you just benefited. He had no comeback. Mom made one final attempt. Jake, we're family. Family takes care of each other. I looked her straight in the eyes. Exactly. So why didn't you take care of me? Nothing. I turned and walked away. Closed the door behind me. Minutes later, my phone buzzed. A message from Dad. Wow. After everything we've done for you, are you really going to leave us? I smiled as I typed back. No. You left me. I'm just finally accepting it. Send. Blocked. But that wasn't the end. The next day, they went public. Facebook posts full of fake concern and carefully disguised attacks. Mom posted about how she didn't raise her son to be selfish. Dad chimed in about children abandoning their parents in their time of need. And of course, Eric jumped in with his fake deep wisdom about family being about love and sacrifice. I had enough. I made my own post. I told the truth. About everything. The years I supported them. The way they excluded me from the will. How I was treated like a wallet, not a son. How Eric was babied, enabled, and never expected to grow up. I didn't attack. I didn't insult. I just told the truth. And the truth hit hard. Friends, cousins, even old family members messaged me, telling me they had no idea what I had been going through. Then came the backlash. Eric, you're a traitor. You didn't have to put our business online. Dad, you've ruined everything. You'll regret this. But I didn't. Not for a second. For the first time in my life, I was free. Free from guilt. Free from manipulation. Free from being their backup plan. No, I don't regret cutting them off. I deserved better. I still do. And from now on, I'll surround myself with people who value me for who I am, not what I can give them. It's finally time for me to move forward. For good.